This is Charles Amerkanian and part 2 of Ode to Gravity. Our program again features composer Brian Eno in conversation on February 2nd, 1980 at the studios of KPFA in Berkeley, California. This portion concludes with a look at Eno's collaboration with David Byrne in the production of the 1980 release My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. But it begins with a look at the history of the recording studio as a compositional tool from the unique vantage point of Brian Eno himself. We've heard his work in the recording studio so far in this program. Maybe, Brian, you could talk a bit about your impressions of its history.
Well, it's quite a long story, and so I'll miss out the first stage. The first stage is the transition from cylinders to discs to wire and so on, and in a sense isn't very interesting because it didn't, or for our purposes, it didn't modify what composers were doing a lot. It wasn't until tape came onto the scene that composers started to think of the record or the recording process as a different thing from the compositional processes as it had been known before. And tape, the most important thing about tape is that it changed music from being an event in time to being an event in space, at least for the length of time that it was on that tape. As soon as something is recorded, you're dealing with it in the same sense that you're dealing with any plastic material. It becomes malleable, you can edit it, you can reverse it, stretch it, and so on and so on. And of course then when it's played back, it once again becomes an event in time, but during that interim period where it's a spatial event, you can do lots of things with it. Lots of things that you never had available prior to the invention of tape. It took a while before anyone started seeing the possibilities of this, and I guess the first person who really did was Les Paul. He was the first. Les Paul and Mary Ford were the first people who started using multi-tracking, which is to say building up a performance in unreal time, really. Until that time, the concept of recording involved a number of people standing in front of a number of microphones and performing their piece, which then went onto a record. And Les Paul was the first person, at least in a big way,